Our scripture lesson this morning is taken from John's Gospel, and this is the third resurrection experience. So Jesus made himself known to his disciples more than once, and to different ones of the disciples. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, known as the Synoptic Gospels, give a similar account on a lot of the stories. John was written a little bit later, and so the story's similar, but you know how different authors can write the same story and it looks like it's a completely different story. So this third resurrection experience, this story is commonly called the breakfast on the beach. It appears only in John. Often the third resurrection experience, we talk about the disciples meeting Jesus on the Emmaus Road, which is found in Luke's Gospel. But this year, we're going to look at this wonderful story from John's Gospel, where Jesus once again appears to his disciples. So he's appeared to Mary and the other women first thing in the morning. Then he was in the room later that day with the locked room the disciples were in. Then about a week later, he appears again to Thomas, when talked about that last week, Thomas the twin, or that has been maligned in calling the doubter, and Thomas needs to see the holes in his hands. And then today, he is appearing, and this is a little bit later, so in the course of a couple of weeks, he is appearing to the fishermen, some of the disciples. They're lost, and they sort of go back on their default mechanism, and they were all fishermen. So they're gone back to fish, they know it, and the story takes place, like I said, at the side of the Sea of Galilee, also known as Lake Tiberias, because it's a very small body of water. Jesus again appeared to the disciples, this time at the Sea of Tiberias. This is how he did it. Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the brothers Zebedee, so that would be James and John, and two other disciples were together. Simon Peter announced, "I'm going fishing." And the rest of them replied, "We're going with you." They went out and got into the boat, and they caught nothing all night. When the sun came up, Jesus was standing on the beach, but they did not recognize him. Jesus spoke to them. "Good morning. Did you catch anything for breakfast?" They answered, "No." He said, "Well, throw the net off on the right side of the boat and see what happens." And they did what he had said. All of a sudden, there were so many fish in it, they weren't strong enough to pull the nets in. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Master." When Simon Peter realized that it was the Master, he put on some clothes, for he was stripped for work, and dove into the sea. The other disciples came in by boat, for they weren't far from land, 100 yards or so, pulling along the net full of fish. And when they got out of the boat, they saw a fire laid with fish and bread cooking on it. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." Simon Peter joined them and pulled the net to shore, 153 big fish. And even with all of those fish, the nets were not torn. Jesus said, "Breakfast is ready." Not one of the disciples dared to ask, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Master. Jesus took the bread and gave it to them. He did the same with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus had shown himself alive to the disciples since being raised from the dead. Now after breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, "Do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Master, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." He then asked him a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Master, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Shepherd my sheep." Then he said a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Now Peter was upset that he asked for the third time, "Do you love me?" And so he answered, "Master, you know everything there is to know. You've got to know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. I am telling you the very truth now. When you were young, you dressed yourself and went wherever you wished. But when you get old, you'll have to stretch out your hands while someone else dresses you and take you where you don't want to go." He said this to hint at the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And then he commanded, "Follow me." May God add blessing and understanding to these words. We don't have bulletins anymore, but if we did, you would see that my sermon title is CBT. Not CBD, but CBT. And does anybody know what CBT stands for? I'm sure a lot of you do. CBT?
Because I've got a piece of paper right here.
All right, well, I'll leave that. I'll leave you. That'll keep you listening. Has anybody here ever experienced? Have you ever had a shore breakfast? Has anybody here ever had a shore breakfast? A few of you. A friend of mine, when he was a lot younger, used to be he was a guide at one of these fly-in fishing camps way up in the Northwest Territories at Great Bear Lake, and he said that, you know, they would get all these people that would fly in from various places, a lot of them from the United States, to these camps. And he was a guide at one of these camps. And so take people out fishing and so forth. And he said the thing that they always liked the best was that he would do a shore breakfast for them. So they go out fishing, then he would clean the fish, and then they would cook it and have this breakfast sort of at sunrise, the shore. And he said, you know, of all the things, there were beautiful camps, and of all the things what happened there, this was always what they talked about, what brought them back. And I was at a shore breakfast once on Lake Superior. It wasn't quite the same because we didn't go out fishing and catch our breakfast, but it was sort of early in the morning. We were right on the edge of Lake Superior, which is bigger than some oceans in the world, and we had all this wonderful food and good friends, and it was really quite a delightful experience. I still remember it quite well. And this is what the disciples were doing after they had lost their friend, their meaning in life. They were really disoriented, discombobulated. They had given up their fishing careers. They had given up previous lives and left their families to follow Jesus. And now he's gone. Sort of that what now? And often when we find ourselves in that position, what now? Or we're really maybe trying to come into a new life, and then we stumble and fall. We often go back on what's familiar. I remember when I worked with men in rehabilitation for drug and alcohol addiction, often the relapses would be about the fact that they would say, you know, I got in a difficult situation, and how I dealt with that before was I either used drugs or alcohol. And I didn't want to do that, and I don't even like it anymore, but it just happened. And I said to them, it's like a default, you know, and I know myself that sometimes when I'm stressed or tired or whatever, that I'll end up falling back into mechanisms I don't like going to the bulk barn and buying candy and eating it, and one of my default mechanisms. So So this was kind of their default. They knew fishing, they knew how to go out and do it, and so they went and started this over again. And of course, they were going to have to pick up some kind of life now that Jesus was gone. So they're out fishing, and they don't catch a single thing. They're out fishing all night, not a fish. So not only is it all the grief that they're dealing with Jesus' death, now they've had a complete bust of a fishing night. And so you can imagine that they're feeling discouraged, they're tired, they're hungry. And then they see this stranger on the beach. Well, I don't know about you, but whenever I see a stranger, I'm always kind of curious as to who it is, and I don't want to be obvious about it, so I'll usually have to take the dog for an extra walk, just to kind of see what's going on and snoop around, unobtrusively. But, so they see this stranger, and they don't really know who it is. And the stranger says to them, well, look, why don't you drop the nets on the other side of the boat and see what happens? Now, these are seasoned fishermen. They know fishing inside out and backwards. And they don't even know who the stranger is. Is he a fisherman? Is he an actor, a comedian? Who is he? Who is this person that says, hey, you know what, And so they decide to take his advice. Now, I don't know, sometimes you ever had that situation where you're in the middle of something you know how to do and it doesn't work, and somebody that knows nothing about what you're doing says, oh, well, I know what you do. You need to do this and this and this. And you think, you need to mind your own business, all right? So, but the disciples weren't feeling that sort of sense of cynicism that I just voiced. So they said, okay, let's give it a try. I mean, what do they have to lose, right? They've been out fishing all night, haven't caught anything. What do they have to lose? Not much. So they throw the nets out on the other side of the boat, and they have such a haul, such a catch, that they can't even pull it in. And so it strikes me that here are these very seasoned fishermen. They've made their living, they've been in family businesses, and they've come sort of to that fork in the road where they just are totally, they don't know how to go forward. And some stranger that they don't know who it is, have never seen, says, hey guys, why don't you just, try something different. Just throw the net out this way instead of this way. And they think, hey, maybe it was just an automatic reaction. Sometimes you get on sort of automatic pilot and you're going through the motions, but you're not really thinking them through. Could have been just automatic pilot, or what the heck, why not? We'll humor this stranger, whoever he or she is. And lo and behold, they get this huge haul of fish. So they're pulling their catch. It's great. They finally got something to show for their night's work. Pulling this haul of fish in, and then this stranger that's on the beach, then they recognize him. This is Jesus. They don't recognize him immediately, but then, wow. And how many times have you and I had that experience where you meet somebody or something happens and you don't even realize until afterwards, hey, that was so-and-so, or, that was the Holy Spirit. That was, I was touched by God in that moment. We see it on the Emmaus Road, a similar situation where the disciples are walking to Emmaus, and a stranger comes and talks with them, and they realize it's Jesus. Sometimes, if you're walking or doing anything really, or being on a bus, and somebody gets talking to you, and they tell you exactly what you need to hear at that time. It's uncanny. It's beautiful, really. But you think, wow, what if I hadn't been at this bus stop at this time to meet this person? And it sometimes can change the whole course of your life. And so this whole sense of the fishermen are still fishing, they're still using the same equipment, but they're just doing it differently. They're trying something different this time, putting the nets on the other side of the boat. And they have a totally different result. And that brings me to something that I wanted to talk about today a little bit. And that is this Sunday, and I'm not sure whether this is a United Church thing or whether it's sort of society has done this, but it's designated as Mental Health Sunday. So a time when we can sort of talk openly and highlight mental health as well as physical and spiritual health. And we all know that during the pandemic, people's mental health took a real beating. And for anybody who already has any tendency to depression or anxiety or mental health issues, it was even worse. And like so many other things, the pandemic laid bare what was already there. And we saw it, and it's very concerning, the number of children and young people that are dealing with mental health issues. And that's always been going on, but again, it's worse because of the pandemic, and the pandemic has laid it bare for us to see that. And so, and I speak as somebody, I mean, I think I told you in an email beginning of the pandemic that I'm no stranger to depression or anxiety, and in fact, it's part of how I ended up in the ministry, but that's a whole other story that we won't get into today. But one of the things that is in current use, has been in use for, I think it first came in the 1980s, but it's sort of a mainstream treatment for people with depression or chronic pain, all kinds of things, is CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, cognitive behavioral therapy is quite straightforward, and what it is, basically, is that it's a way of training your mind to think about things differently. So I'll give you a little example. Because I've been on the receiving end of CBT different times, and one of the times was, I think I mentioned a week, maybe it was last week, that I live with chronic pain. And so quite a few years ago, I went through a pain management program because this chronic pain was really rendering me unable to work and really unable to function normally. So I found out about it, and I remember talking to the doctor, and I said, "Do you think this would be a good program for me?" And he said, "Well, it was a month long. Can you get time off your work?" And I said, "Well, leave that to me. Is it a good?" "Oh yeah," he says, "Kath, it would be a good program." And of course I'm thinking, "Oh good, this is all going to be." I said, "Well, that's good." I said, I'm ready to put this behind me." And I will never forget what he said to me. He said, "Well, the pain won't go away, but you'll learn how to manage it. You'll learn how to manage it." And I thought, oh shucks. I thought if I was just a really good little student here, that I could just put all this behind me. Anyways, I went into the program, and one of the things that they used was cognitive behavioral therapy. And the way that they used that was so that they trained us how to think differently about pain. So, come in, you think, "Oh, I'm in pain, I can't stand this, my life is over, what am I gonna do, blah, blah, blah." It's a natural reaction, isn't it? And so what cognitive behavioral therapy taught us to do is to say, okay, yeah, the fact is, right now I'm in pain. That's a fact. Now, it doesn't have to ruin my life. What can I do? How can I do? So it's a way of using your brain. It's kind of a retraining of your brain so that you look at things differently. And just like the disciples, who once they looked at their fishing differently, they were able to get a different result. Now, I still live with pain, and if you ask me, yes, I'm in pain right now. However, I've learned more or less how to manage and how to go forward. And so really, that program changed my life, honestly. That's the honest truth. It changed my life because I realized that I could manage, and then you can transfer that learning into other parts of your life. So that's, putting it very, very simply, it's learning how to think of things differently. I remember one of the examples in one of the books I read was, Have you ever had to wait for like a late bus, a late train, and you're standing there and you're getting more and more anxious and upset, and you're thinking, like this plane or this bus is so late. Look, I've been waiting here, so I can't take this. And then you just have to stop and say, well, wait a second. You are taking it, so you can take it. So why put more pain on yourself by saying, I just can't take this, I can't take this. Well, you're standing there taking it. So I sort of laughed at that example because I remembered how many times I had been, say, at a bus stop or waiting for a train, and getting so worked up because this thing was late and I just can't take this anymore. And I think, well, I am taking it, so I can, and so it was almost kind of laughable. And I'm not making light of CBT, but that's kind of the essence of what it is. And so it's that sense of using whatever our God-given gifts are to change the way we think. Now, that being said, that is one tool that is in pretty common use these days, and that's just scratching the surface. But I just wanted to say, and so Jack, you can read what's on the paper now because it wasn't cognitive behavioral therapy, it was
Cognitive biblical therapy.
So I think that this passage, which was already assigned to this Sunday, and then this Sunday, I don't know if whoever assigned Mental Health Sunday to this Sunday saw that connection, but that whole sense of so many times in life we have to look at things totally differently, and sometimes we have to have somebody else to help us to find those different ways of looking at things differently. And sometimes we have to talk to a professional or go to a group or do something to help us see things differently and live out our lives differently. And there's I'm so delighted that after 35 years, I can finally say this in a pulpit. There is absolutely no shame or no issue with saying, I need to talk to somebody. I need to have help with my mental health, because that in no way is a mirror of our spiritual health. People of faith often have said to me over the years, and I felt it myself many times, well, if I really had faith, if I really was a person of faith, I wouldn't have to worry about mental health issues. But mental health is like physical health. Sometimes we have things we didn't ask for, we didn't expect. If somebody has cancer or somebody has diabetes or somebody has a heart condition, you don't think, well, gee, if I had more faith, this wouldn't be the issue. But mental health is the same. It's the same as having diabetes or heart condition or whatever. Having lousy health of any kind stinks, doesn't it? Nobody wants it. We all want to be healthy and hale and doing our thing. But there isn't any shame, and there should never be any stigma or any kind of sense that we have to sneak around to get help, or we have to hide relatives or family members. You remember the old days when it was like, remember when cancer was like that? Oh, well, he's got cancer. And we bring that out, and it says, well, they're at the Ontario Hospital. No, they're getting help for a health issue, and we wish them well. So I wanted to just highlight that for today, because my guess is the disciples were feeling all kinds of things when they threw those nets on the other side of the boat. They were probably grieving the loss of their friend. They may have been angry. They gave up their lives, followed this person, he's gone, they don't know what to do. Some of them followed Jesus against the wishes of their family, so now they've kind of burned some of those bridges, and they're really just overwhelmed, lost. And now they can't even catch any fish, which was what they did. Until somebody they don't know, probably never fished in their life, says, hey guys, throw the nets over the other side. Duh, why didn't we think about that? But in that moment, it was that stranger who turned out to be Jesus, who helped them to see things differently. I hope that as we go forward, you and I can help one another and ourselves to look at things differently. when we look at things differently, often those things appear different to us. So let's remember the breakfast on the beach. And by the way, if you ever get a chance to go to a shore breakfast, do it. It's a wonderful experience, even for those of us that don't get up very early in the morning. It's a great experience, and just remember Jesus unfolding this beautiful meal to those weary, tired, depressed disciples and laying out, because that's what Jesus does for us every single day, lays out the feast, and we're ready to take it. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Be if you had no education?
This off. Say that again. Where would you be if you had no education? Every child has the right to learn. Your generous support through mission and service means that children around the world can go to school thanks to partnerships with organizations like the Kenya Alliance for Advancement of Children, KAARC. School fees, violence, child labor, and discrimination mean that too many children can't go to or stay in school. KAARC brings together child rights organizations to share information about child protection and safeguarding and to support children who are in schools. Thanks to your support, KAARC has established over 300 child rights clubs in schools. One of these clubs helped Meshach through primary school. A bursary program helps him pay his high school fees, and the Child Rights Club at his school is teaching him how to be a positive role model. Quote, to start going to school was a problem. KARC helped me. They encouraged me a lot. They enabled me to start my primary school. Now I'm in high school, Meshach says. The club is helping us a lot too. They give us role models to teach us what is bad and help us be confident in whatever we are doing. I'm very, very happy. Thank you for helping to break down barriers so that every child can go to school, regardless of who they are, where they live, or how much money they have.
Very timely message, and There are still so many places where children are not able to go to school. Girls are carrying water from the well, so can't go to school. So really, really important. Education opens doors. And my wish for every child, and I think it's yours too, is that they get an education. We're going to gather in prayer. And all right, let's take a moment as we gather our hearts and minds in prayer. Let us pray. Gracious God, we have heard your word, and we ask that we can take that word to any and all in our circles who are in need of hope or assurance, confidence. You have gifted us with this beautiful place where we worship, this land upon which many people have found footing, many people before us, and many who will come after us. You have gifted us with safe food and water, and while we complain about the cost, there are others who would pay any cost for the food and the water that we access so freely. We are thankful for this opportunity to gather and to worship and pray in the ways that we choose, for we know that in too many places around the world, to gather in your name is evoking a potential death sentence. And so we give thanks. We give thanks for the ability to elect the leaders of our choosing, even if we don't like the selections on the ballot box. We know that it is up to us to do something about that. And there are too many places in the world where there is only one name on the ballot, and the name that is there is not one that is capable of leading in a way that is fair or just. And so, God, there are so many things that we have to be thankful for, and sometimes we are too busy or preoccupied or discombobulated, like the disciples were, to realize our gifts. We thank you. And